Chapter 30. This is where we find out if Pip gets the job at the Globe Theatre. Out of a little more than admiration for Pip's persistence, Richard Burbage agreed to employ him as one of the theatre boys. He would be a stagehand, a cleaner, a dog's body, and a jack of all trades, given the tasks that no one else had the time, energy, or inclination to do. His only specific duty was clearing up the Globe, sweeping the floor before every performance and afterwards. He would be paid a penny a day, and he could watch the shows for free. Pip started work immediately. He swept the stage, then scrubbed the wooden planks with a wet cloth. The work was boring, but curiously satisfying. He hunched over spots of dirt that had been embedded into the wood for weeks, if not years. Soon the blonde timber was glistening in the midday sun. Nathan came to congratulate him. He chatted for a few minutes. Nathan pointed out the few important men in the company, describing their roles, then went to prepare for the play. In the afternoon, people started flowing into the Globe, paying their pennies at the door and taking their places. Pip stood at the back, watching the audience. He searched their faces, looking for the weasel, pig-face, scar and tooth, seeing none of them. He kept a lookout for Indigo Jones, hoping to repay his debt, but Mr. Jones was nowhere to be seen. Maybe he'd taken an early boat to Venice. Finally, Pip looked for his father, but that felt like the most hopeless of quests. Hundreds of men came into the Globe, and just about any of them might have been his father. He hoped that if he did actually see George Stone, a sudden shock of recognition would pass between them, a mutual understanding, the same blood ran through their veins, but it never happened. Perhaps his dad was 1,000 miles away, perhaps he was 6 feet under the ground, or perhaps he was here, mingling in the crowd, and they simply hadn't recognised one another. As more and more people flooded into the Globe, Pip found himself distracted by the variety of faces and bodies, and gradually forgot to look out for his enemies and his dad. There was too much else to see. When the play was just about to start, Pip pushed through the pit and made his way to the front, standing just under the rim of the stage. If he'd stood anywhere else in the pit, he'd hardly have been able to see a thing, because he was so much shorter than most of the men and women in the theatre. Tomorrow he decided he would sneak into the gallery and watch from there. He wouldn't need a cushion, he would be happy to sit anywhere, but he would look down on the play rather than standing on tiptoes at the front of the crowd, squashed between two men smelling their armpits and garlicky breath. He looked up and recognised one of them. It was the writer. Nathan had pointed him out. Pip tugged his sleeve and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Shakespeare, excuse me." Shakespeare glanced down at Pip. "Yes? Could you move your arm, please? You're hurting my ear." Without a word, Shakespeare moved his arm. "Thank you, sir," said Pip. "You're the new boy, aren't you?" "Yes, sir." "Good luck." Shakespeare didn't address another word to him, but Pip didn't care. Good luck. The company's writer had wished him luck. Feeling very pleased with himself, Pip turned his attention to the play. Today the company performed an Italian comedy. Rich merchants paced up and down the stage, discussing love, money and boats. They wore velvet breeches and leather jackets with fur collars. Rapiers hung from their belts. That's a good sign, thought Pip. There might be a fight later. When the men finished their conversation and left the stage, a door opened at the back and 2 tall, glamorous women emerged. They had blonde hair, pale skin and scarlet lips. Their dresses were covered with rubies, glistening in the sunlight, and a long chain of pearls hung around their necks. As these 2 beauties strolled towards the front of the stage, someone in the crowd put his fingers to his lips and wolf whistled. The women smiled at their whistler. One of them, the prettier of the 2, swayed her hips and fluttered her eyelashes. The whistler shouted out, "I love you." The pretty woman lifted her long, white fingers to her lips and blew him a kiss. The whistler yelled, "Come here and do that." Maybe later, said the pretty woman, giving another flutter of her long eyelashes. She turned to her companion and said, By my troth, nursery, my little body is weary of this great world. You would be sweet, madam, replied the other woman, if your miseries were in the same abundance as your good fortunes are. As the two women talked, they paced slowly up and down the front of the stage, showing off their rather lovely bodies and elegantly tailored dresses. Both of them had small chests and delicate feet, but nothing was as attractive as their faces. In the clear sunlight, they looked like angels. Pip had been watching them for a few minutes, when to his astonishment he realised that one of them, the prettier, was Nathan Field. Pip became even more confused later in the play when Nathan's character, a rich heiress named Portia, disguised himself as a man so she could get a job as a lawyer. So Nathan was a boy pretending to be a girl, pretending to be a boy. Thinking about it made Pip's head hurt. That wasn't the only complicated part of the play. Pip found himself bewildered by most of the words that people spoke. They always used 10 when 2 would do and deliberately picked vocabulary which only a school teacher would understand, rarely speaking in a plain way that ordinary people spoke. Things improved when Robert Armand sauntered onto the stage. He sang several songs and told a string of rude jokes, which had Pip doubled over with laughter. Richard played a Jew, who was owed money by a Christian. Pip had never met a Jew, so he was interested to see what they looked like. Richard wore a big false nose and a long red beard. If all Jews looked like that, Pip thought, they must be easy to recognise. He decided to try and spot one in the streets of London. The audience hissed and booed whenever the Jew spoke. At the end, the Christian took revenge on the Jew, grabbing his money and his daughter. Cheers broke out all around the theatre. The actors lined up at the front of the stage and bowed. Richard whipped off his false nose and hurled it into the audience for some lucky person to keep as a souvenir. And that's the end of chapter 30. At least we now know that Pip has got a job at the Globe Theatre.